Working Draft on Tour. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Christian. How are you today?
Fine, a bit exhausted because yesterday we both were at the Midwald Head in the Cloud or Heat in the Cloud event, or we renamed it.
In the crowd is about right, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite warm.
Yes.
And is still.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a fantastic festival-esque conference event or like celebration crossover thing.
Like a nice nerdy summer garden party with a whacking great data center in the corner of the building.
Yeah.
Gently wearing away.
Yeah. And a well-climatized data center building, I have to add. So you also gave a talk yesterday. So there were 3 tracks.
Yes.
There was culture and creativity. There was DevOps and there was the tech
and
track.
Tech, because cloud and DevOps are totally different to tech.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like maybe it's like a Michelin's kind of track where they can just put everything.
Yeah,
and it always works. So you gave a talk about
I did. My talk was called "What Does a Fossil-Free Internet in Germany Look Like?"
Yeah,
and that's because I work for an organisation called the Green Web Foundation, and we're working towards a fossil-free internet globally. But given the fact that I'm in Germany, we're a Dutch organisation, but one of our headquarters, as in our biggest office, is in Berlin. Mm-hmm. And if I'm speaking at a German conference, it probably makes sense to kind of adjust some of the content to fit the country. And also Germany is particularly interesting because it's the largest economy in Europe, has the largest data center sector in Europe, and arguably probably has, I think, some of the most potential to actually improve.
Yes.
Because Germany is like the land of coal and the land of solar, as we saw yesterday. Yeah. And there is a chance for it to switch. Yeah, so that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also this project that you also, of course, know of, electricity maps.
Yes.
You can clearly see how Germany is still very partly fossil driven.
Yes. Well, this is precisely what you said. You're referring to the map that basically shows how clean the electricity is all around the world. Yep. And Germany's grid switches quite a lot between being very, very clean and very, very dirty, depending on how windy and sunny it is, more so than other countries. Mm-hmm. And now that we're seeing this move to batteries and things like that means you get, say, when it's clean, you can get it to stay clean by actually thoughtful use of how computing works and thoughtful use of storing some of the energy that you don't need when you have too much, as it were. Yep. So you can use it instead of having to kind of go back to using coal a lot.
So that's staying below that threshold where the coal power plants are being booted.
Yes, precisely. That's the role that batteries are able to play inside this. And we spoke a little bit about that yesterday, about there was a big growth taking place. But primarily it was about introducing people to the idea that yes, the electricity that we rely on to power all of our digital services, it comes from somewhere. And as professionals, we probably should be thinking about that, and there are actually steps we can take. Yep. So that was it. That was the general idea behind the talk, to give people an idea. But we can head there.
So what steps can take?
Yeah, there's a few things that you can do. We recently launched a report called The State of the Fossil-Free Internet. It's the first one that we'll be doing every year. And we basically touched on, essentially, there's one kind of issue that we currently have, where we had a sector which was decarbonizing, but then since we've essentially seen this kind of mania to build out more and more data centers, particularly to meet demands of mostly generative AI, not the actual kind of traditional kind of AI or predictive AI that we often get a lot of value from already, we see this incredible build out right now. And that's basically doubling the amount of energy you need to decarbonize. But it also means that this is actually problematic in lots of other ways, because you've actually seen this idea from a shift from decarbonization to recarbonization.
Yes.
So rather than phasing out fossil fuels, you're now seeing some cases where you're seeing data centers which are powered exclusively on fossil fuels.
Yep.
And this is something that we're now seeing in Germany. Like there's one data center which is set up with its own gas turbine. And we're like, guys, this is like the opposite of where we need to be going.
Yep.
So we were speaking about some of that. But to go back to your initial question, like, what can you do? I think there are three things we've kind of laid out in the report. So first of all, it's actually manage the demand. Be thoughtful about it. Think about, okay, how much demand am I placing onto the grid, and how much demand am I creating through the design of my services, for example, right? And that's that's just like things like efficiency and thoughtful architecture. Now, the one was about greening the energy, which is pretty self-explanatory, but there's different ways that you can kind of purchase more meaningful green energy versus not so meaningful green energy. And to make that concrete, some companies basically are talking about they try to decarbonize on an hourly basis, with the idea being that instead of saying we're just going to buy a normal energy tariff, and then buy some certificates from, say, Norway or Iceland, and then apply them and say they're green, because the law lets you do
like
that.
You can offset your
it's a little bit like offset
by
exactly. That's one of the things that is used a lot of the time. But a more convincing way is to actually meaningfully match this. So at night, you actually are matching that with, rather than just relying on solar, you might say, well, we're working with a supplier who actually gets power from wind and from solar and from storage, so that there's always some kind of meaningful clean power. And the actual kind of demand signals that we do, that, I mean, if you're purchasing from a supplier like that, and they're purchasing like the batteries and things like that, that changes the cost of batteries in the long term. The same, we've seen that basically Germany played a massive role in the 2000s to bring down the cost of solar and wind, such that it's basically one of the main hopes for climate right now in terms of decarbonizing our system. We can do the same with batteries, and we can do the same with like all kinds of new technologies. And that's one of the things that, as a developer, you don't have to do it yourself, but you do need to make a deliberate decision. Like, who am I purchasing this from? And there are actually providers in Germany that do this.
Incentivize
energy
providers to offer these kinds of energy mixes, because there's like demand.
Exactly, yeah. This is a new shift. This is like the cool new thing in the world of kind of energy, basically. And that's one thing that most developers haven't really had to think about, but I think there's something that we probably should be thinking about if we're going to think of ourselves as responsible technologists. And the final thing that we mentioned, the third thing that is in the report that we launched, was actually about just democratizing the actual industry, so that you don't have three massive companies taking up more than half of all of the sector, because but you have
the three hyperscalers.
Yes, the three hyperscalers, because the priorities that they have it's pretty clear that they're not really aligned with the goals, like the climate goals that I think most of us in society. And that's one thing that came up inside when I was presenting. But in the report, this is the thing we talk about. We're saying, well, we need to have a wider set of ownership models. You need to have a kind of more diverse ecosystem of providers. Because when we're at a conference where you have a company which is much, much more climate aligned and climate aware than one of the hyperscalers, which is literally deploying a new data center with the same data center capacity, 2.7 gigawatts, as all of Germany, right? And they've just said, oh, we're going to do a deal with Chevron to power this. So you basically that gives you that is a clear statement that you have very, very different priorities for society versus this company, right? So that's one of the things that you need to be thinking about. I think when you have a more democratized, larger set of smaller players, then you don't have this unaccountability, essentially, that you have this, because this should be outrageous to most of us that's happening. But if we didn't have such concentration, you might not see things like that so much.
I would also say that only the hyperscalers are able to build data centers and plan them with a power plant included, because I don't think Midwald or Etzner or any of the typical European hostess is big enough and also mad enough to be able to build such a thing. So
this is true. There is a lot when you do hear some of the big stories about saying, I know, let's put together a on-site massive gas-fired power station exclusively for say exclusively for a data center,
Yeah.
you generally see it being aimed at large hyperscale providers. All right. Now that isn't always Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, but usually the people who are building that are hoping to sell to groups like that.
Yeah.
And that's when you see these mega projects, particularly in the US. They will usually kind of use these words to use these companies. Like, yeah, we're in talks with it, but whether they actually have that contract or not is another matter. Because there's a whole question about how speculative this boom actually is.
Yep.
And we've seen quite a number of projects actually not make it in the US, for example. But it's not just the hyperscalers who are actually driving this. You do see the data center sector themselves trying to do things like this. And the example that we mentioned in, say, the example of a massive 60 megawatt gas-fired power station, that's largely being aimed at the US hyperscalers, but it may be the case that once it's built, another kind of company might come into it as well, because you are seeing lots and lots of new entrants into this field because there's a boom. And it may be that there are even European providers or European companies who are a bit more relaxed about gas than really they should be, given the state of the climate. And like, it's warm today, it's not like it's gonna get cooler, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you also offer like the Green Web Foundation itself offers also like tooling around like that helps developers and everybody else also to get like visibility into these things, and also to maybe get closer to that goal.
I can tell you a little bit about that. So and I'm glad you mentioned electricity maps before. So earlier on this year, we did a collaboration with electricity maps to basically put the carbon intensity of every single country into CO2JS, our kind of flagship library. Now, if you have
we have to explain what CO2JS is.
So CO2JS is a JavaScript library that you can use in any kind of product, and it will give you, it'll tell you how clean power is based on where you are in the world, because it's basically got like all the lookups. So if I'm in, say, Germany, I know it's going to be this. If I'm in France, it's going to be that, and so on. All right.
So it's always like where the visitor comes from, right?
We have it set up so that it's just a lookup table, basically. Yeah. That's what we have inside it. That's the deal we do with electricity maps. So we have annual figures there. You can use that. And if you have Firefox installed on your computer, you probably have this code already installed on your computer as well, because CO2JS is used inside the Firefox browser to provide some of the kind of carbon metrics in their developer tools themselves. Yeah, because they were they were the first browser to work with us, and in fact,
there's like a fantastic profiling tool to like see at what moment in time on your website how much electricity was consumed, which part of your computer.
Yes, so that you've got that kind of detail. So you can basically optimize at that micro level detail. So you can, might kind of essentially like optimize at the micro level for carbon. And we initially had some data from another organization called Ember, who are a nonprofit who have been publishing this information. But the thing we found was that electricity maps data was actually, it's really, really good for the grid that you're actually on. Because in certain parts of the world, the grid might be very, very different. For example, if you're in the US, on, say, the East Coast, you're going to be using a lot of coal, right? Yep. But on the West Coast, you might be using loads of, say, hydro and solar, which means you will have much, much cleaner power. So you need to kind of represent this inside it. So the thing
it's more detailed than the one that
it's much better geographic detail.
Down,
Yes. Now the thing I'll share with you is that this is geographic detail, which is one thing they need to take into account. But obviously, solar panels don't work as well at night as they do during the day. All right. So there's a kind of temporal thing you need to take into account as well. Now, if you want to design systems that respond to these changes in carbon intensity throughout the day, then electricity maps provide that as a service. We don't do that. We just have the annual data. Exactly. Yeah. So that's what we have. So you can start. And then when you want to actually get a bit more sophisticated, or you want to have things respond, because who knew that the power in Germany is negative at lunchtime during the summer most of the time, because there's that much signal. Yeah. All right. These are the things that are useful to be aware of, and that's what electricity maps does. But we started to kind of at least give people something so they can start to understand and realize, okay, wow, there's this whole dynamic thing, and there are all these things I can do to like change where I might run computing to like kind of change the environmental impact of doing that, for example.
Yeah. I think one of your colleagues,
First Shared, yes, First Shared.
I think he built a project where he used that in Cloudflare workers, I think.
Yes, you're talking about the grid-aware websites project. So we were using, we actually worked with Electricity Maps to get a specific API that was available for free, basically. So normally, if you want to have very, very high detailed data, the kind of data that you would need to use for accounting, you might pay for that. And there's like basically a subscription you can use if you can integrate it into your business, for example. But we work with them to get kind of levels API available. So you don't have the specific numbers in kind of grams of CO2 per hour, but you do get high, low, and medium, which is enough for you to design things accordingly.
Yeah, and I think it's even easier to work with than like creating buckets yourself.
Exactly. So this is the thing that's kind of that was the work we had to put into that, because honestly, every grid is slightly different. So what is high, low, and medium matters on a per grid basis. So that was one thing we have, and that provides a really nice, easy API for you to use that. So yes, there's an open source library that we have for that now. If you look up Grid Aware and Green Web Foundation, we should be at the top of the list in most search engines. So that's one thing you can do. And that doesn't use CO2.js, but that uses some of the other code we have, because we have a number of open source projects in our like batch repositories.
Yeah, you also have like this what is it like? Do we like the Verzeichnis? What is it in like an index of? Web hosters.
Indeed, yeah. This is how we started out. So the Green Web Foundation initially started as basically a list and a way of checking if a website runs on green energy. So we still have that, and that means that if you have any domain, you can look up the domain and say, okay, where is my site being hosted? And what we do behind the scenes is we find where that domain is being hosted. We basically contact that provider, or moreover, the provider contacts us, and then we look.
Because you already have like established yourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
They have an interest in being listed.
So, and then if we have evidence that they're running on green energy, that they've showed like, this is the tariff I'm using, or these are the steps we're taking, we'll show that in a website. And then that means that you get a checking system, and we get between 5 and 15 million checks a day, depending on depending on the day, to be honest. And we also have a directory, which is the list of all these ones. So it may be that I'm looking for a provider of a certain managed service, let's say WordPress, or a platform as a service, or a managed database. We list that stuff so that you can actually kind of think through your stack and then see how you can green your stack, basically. That's the stuff that we do there as well.
Yeah, nice. And finally, yesterday you also presented something new, I think, or rather new at least, which is Carbon TXT?
Carbon.txt, yeah. This is our new project right now. So I spoke before about how we have a kind of checking system, which is based on domains. Now, in order to use that, you have to trust us for that. And okay, we have a team who do this research, and there's some work that happens there, but we would really like this to be not something that's run by a small team of people, but instead, this is something that should happen at protocol level. So the kind of big idea behind Carbon.txt is to set this expectation that, of course, this kind of sustainability data that we look for should be available if you look up a domain. Just like how you look up robots.txt or LLMs.txt. We think you should be able to find the stuff for how green a domain is. So that's the stuff we use. And the thing we're doing is we're basically shifting from having a centralized database to nudging people towards having a more distributed approach, because that would allow other Green Web Foundation kind of organizations in, say, India or China. If we have the kind of same approach, then that allows us to change how the web works, basically. That's the big idea. And that allows also more kinds of innovation on this as well, on the side as well. That allows people to kind of try new ideas. So it may be that we have a bunch, we do this with primarily hosting providers right now, but it may be that, let's say, you're building some kind of self-hosted solar-powered websites or things like that. Maybe that's a point of innovation that means that, okay, people start changing how people design sites like that. And there are actually examples. There's a project called the Solar Protocol, which has a bunch of Raspberry Pis all around the world, where when you visit a website, basically the request is routed to the Raspberry Pi in the world with the most battery and where it's sunniest, right? Nice. And and in the world of CMSs, I found out that Dries Buitert of Drupal.
Mhm.
He's done something similar. So if you go to dree.es, his website, you can see his website, but there's also solar.drees, where he's just, here's my website, here's how I'm powering it with literally solar and battery on my garden roof.
Was that the thing
Yeah.
you showed?
That was the thing I was showing, yeah.
Well, like there were dots for every day,
Exactly.
and you could see where there was like a few days where I think the service was even like
It was a bit
unavailable,
slower, yeah.
slower. I don't know, because
So-
there wasn't enough solar.
This was the idea. Like there are things that you can do, and you can change some of that by changing the batteries, or maybe changing what your device is doing to kind of make it through these times.
Yeah.
But the reason we wanted to set up something like Carbon.text was to essentially have a space where innovators and people who are working on ideas can try new things, so that rather than all the good ideas just coming from one place, us, they were from a community. Because we've seen how things work with open source. We've seen how new ideas come through. We figured, let's go for something like that because, well, we like the web. Our entire background is open data and open source. We figured maybe this is one place you can actually kind of bring some new ideas to bear and hopefully accelerate how, I guess, this change in culture that we might actually have. Because I think most developers would like to be more responsible developers, but a lot of the time they don't know about this because they've had no reason to learn.
Yeah.
So hopefully this makes it a bit easier for them to kind of start getting into this, in my view, new and kind of exciting world.
And like to get like more into detail about the carbon text file. So how is that? Like basically what you write in there is like all kinds of information, how your website is being.
What we have is we have a relatively lightweight syntax. So it's largely a TOML file at the moment, because the thing we wanted to have something which was easy for humans to read, but also for machines to read.
Yes.
Yeah. And we ended, and the kind of one of the principles inside it is basically links or it didn't happen. The idea being that you might have a carbon.txt file that has a little bit of lightweight syntax, like what's your organization, for example, or do you have a supply chain, for example, and or if you've met some kind of certification, where would you be? What is that certification, and where's the link to the supporting data? So there's stuff like that. It's quite lightweight syntax. It's designed in the open on carbontext.org, and that's basically what we have. So these are lightweight files which are designed to be parsed quite easily, or parsed by various validators and tools, and we have an open source validator that people can use themselves, or you can use our hosted version if you want to just point at a domain and see what comes out of it.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I think you showed like pieces of it, but
Yes.
So I saw the link things, but I wasn't fully sure. Like I couldn't fully parse it myself.
Yeah, to be honest, the thing when I was presenting yesterday, I was like, I'm not quite sure. Tech is a very, very wide term, so I'm not going to make it too technical.
Yes.
So that's why it ended up being quite an expansive talk first.
Yeah.
There was like a bit of code for the nerds at the end, right?
Yeah.
So we showed some code samples. But
it was perfect.
Yeah.
You can still, it's just like you gave it yesterday.
Yeah.
I hadn't time to like do research because we all returned like pretty late to the hotel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's actually one thing that is probably worth mentioning here is that literally the day before, I had a much deeper dive with Smashing Smashing Magazine.
Yeah,
they actually did.
I registered for the Smashing Meets.
The Smashing Meets. They did a sustainability one. So I was opening this, and then there was Ines. Ines, I'm so sorry.
Ines Akrap or something.
Thank you, Akrap. Yeah, I forgot how to pronounce her surname. So I wrote the foreword for her new book that she was actually telling people about, because she's launched. She just finished a book about sustainable web design with, I think, Chris Chinchilla. So she was a speaker after me, and then Tom Greenwood, who was like one of the original people to build like the website Carbon website back in.
Yeah, you also wrote this book, right?
Exactly. He was also one of the authors of one of the books around sustainable web design for. I forget the name of the actual book, but they did it with a book of art.
It was sustainable web design.
It might actually be, yeah. So there's a number of authors, and we basically did an entire session all about that. So I did a kind of deep dive on carbon.text, the theory of change behind it, some of the things we've learned along the way. And then you had Ines talking about here's where things are. And you had Tom Greenwood saying, here's what's happened over the last 10 years, for example. So yeah, so if for people who are listening to this and want to learn a bit more, that's one place to go to.
Yeah, we'll link to it. I registered. Yeah. I knew that I would not be able to participate, but I wanted to register to get the videos afterwards. because it was the birthday of my nephew, and we were in the mountains, and there was like crappy internet anyways. So I was just keen on getting the videos fast and not having to wait or be on a lookout on YouTube.
Well, glad you got here. We got a chance to get it from the horse's mouth directly as well.
Yeah. So the final thing maybe we could quickly briefly discuss is your involvement in the WCC and in the Web Sustainability Interest Group.
Yes,
I think
there are a few other projects going on. So I think last year, I think it's a little over a year ago, the W3C, as in the guys behind HTML, CSS, and the web part of JavaScript.
The authority, basically.
Yeah, exactly. They hired a director of sustainability, and she's been supporting the web, an interest group inside the. Interest group is a bit like a kind of like working group, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah, like not super official.
Exactly. Yeah, they're one level down.
Thing. Yeah.
So there's in the W3C kind of jargon, there's like community groups, interest groups, and then working groups.
Yes.
So the working groups manage CSS and HTML. So it's one down. And so that's the idea. It's on the way.
You don't need to have a membership or be an invited expert. Jump through these.
You still need to become invited experts to be part of it. Or there are still steps you need to jump through like that. So it's got that level of officialness.
So, higher bars than the community group.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's in there, and one of the things that group has been working on for the last, I think, year and a half actually, is something called the Web Sustainability Guidelines, the WSGs. These are they're kind of, you might think of them as a little bit like the WCAG, but for sustainability.
Yeah.
So that's one thing they're doing. And independently, I work for the Green Web Foundation. We're a Dutch non-profit of, I'd say, 9 people. There is a larger body called the Green Software Foundation with companies like Google and Microsoft and GitHub and Accenture and all these people there.
Are they related or linked?
Or just we were one of the founding members of the Green Software Foundation. So we were because that was set up about 5 years ago. It had 5 years ago, because it had its 5th birthday recently. So that was set up with us, the Green Web Foundation, but also Microsoft put money in, and I believe maybe not GitHub, but a few other companies put the money in to actually get it set up. And I've been involved with that group for a while. So I host one of their podcasts called Environment Variables, and I also we're leading. We basically kind of brokered a deal between the W3C and the Green Software Foundation, because they have a standard called Software Carbon Intensity. All right.
Yeah.
So with the Green Web Foundation, we were like a logical group to kind of work inside that to say, okay, let's make a more specialized one specifically for websites and web applications. And we said, well, okay, we don't mind doing this, but the W3C is right there, and we should probably have these conversations. So we ended up brokering a memorandum of understanding. So the GSF and the W3C are working together, and we are leading, as in the Green Web Foundation is leading this new standardization process. But the key thing is that we got consultation with all 3, so that people know what each other's doing, rather than it just being
everybody working in isolation. Yeah,
precisely. So that's the thing we're doing, and it looks like we're aiming for the first draft of a spec for software carbon intensity for the web, something that all these various tools from vendors can actually kind of conform to. We're aiming for Q4 to have the first version of this out for people to start implementing and using. So hopefully this time next year, we should actually have an ISO standard or something being on the ISO track, and a number of vendor tools which are interoperable that follow the same standard, which would be wonderful. Because that's something that, you need standards to have any kind of interoperability and comparability, and kind of basically set up a real kind of movement around this. So that's the thing we're working on as well.
Yeah, that's nice. Also seeing how successful WCAG has become.
Yes.
Because it's now being ported and applied to apps, to
it's not just that
digital software product.
Exactly. I mean, this is also one of the ways that you're able to kind of change some of the culture related to kind of computing, right? So WCAG, for accessibility, yes, it has an impact here, but when you have a standard which you can show buy-in and you can show people actively using, that means you can then say, well, we have laws for society which make sure that certain groups' needs are always met, right? And the existence of things like the WCAG, and the existence of there being clear evidence of organizations working, and there being something which is objective enough to kind of base laws around, means that you can now have things like the European Accessibility Act, which basically means that everyone has to be building websites that take into account the needs of people who have disability needs. And that feels like, for me, that was one of the things that kind of attracted me about the web. The idea that you want to have something which is universally available, serves everyone, we saw Tim Berners-Lee, he says this is for everyone. And I think that's a real rallying cry. And I get a bit emotional about this stuff, but that's kind of where we saw it with disability, with the WCAG and accessibility. We figured we should be able to do something with sustainability because we've only got one planet right now,
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea, and it's fantastic work you're doing. Always following along, and really interested where that's going.
Well, it's nice of you to say. We're still a small group, and we could always do bigger. So I think our movement, if people are listening to this and they like the idea of a more sustainable, fossil-free web, then there's lots of places they can get involved. They can speak with the Green Web Foundation. They can do work with the W3C, these kind of groups here. If they're a larger corporate, or if they're working inside a company, there are places like the W3C and the Green Software Foundation now. And if you're a techie and you just want to find a community of other climate-minded techies, there's one organization called climateaction.net, which is one of the most supportive and really, really useful communities to be part of. I was working in that since 2018, actually, and it's gone from 70 people to 10,000 members. And that's one of the places where I learn loads from a peer. So yeah, those are things that if people are listening and they're curious, that's for the show notes. Yeah,
we'll definitely link to it also to your profile. So if there's any questions arising, coming up.
I'm all ears. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So thank you, Chris. It was fantastic to finally meet you here, because I knew your face already from things you do, as well as the ones from your colleagues.
Well, Christian, thank you for letting me do this auf English and instead of auf Deutsch.
So you can speak German, but
I'm slowly learning. But I think I would sound much better on a podcast in English than auf Deutsch.
That's I totally understand, and I know it's hard. Understanding the language is always okay. But then speaking, you're always looking for the right words.
Ich habe Restaurant. Ich habe Restaurant Deutsch, nicht Podcast Deutsch.
Okay, then maybe at a restaurant podcast next time. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks,
safe travels.
Thank you very much.
And hope to see you soon again. And I will link to anything we discussed for people to dig in.
Dankeschön, Christian, and gute Reise.
Dankeschön.
Okay,
bis
ciao.
bald. Tschüss.